Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. We've just finished up reviewing a whole range of 4K monitors throughout 2021 so far, so we figured it's the perfect time to give our thoughts on the best 4K monitors you can buy right now. This is a product category that's really evolved in 2021, with more options than ever before, more affordable monitors that are worth buying, and crucial new categories like high refresh 32-inch displays. Before getting into our picks, I want to briefly talk about whether you should buy a 4K monitor or not. Obviously, there are lots of monitor categories these days, and perhaps there might be something that's more suitable for you. My general thoughts for a large number of PC gamers is that you should probably choose 1440p over 4K right now. 1440p medium refresh monitors, so around that 144Hz mark, are much cheaper than 4K equivalents right now, and there are lots more options to choose from. Alternatively, if you want to go high-end, 1440p monitors will offer higher refresh rates at the same price as 4K. With current GPU hardware, you'll be able to run games at higher frame rates on 1440p, leading to a smoother experience, whereas for a lot of people, native 4K gaming is going to be more like 60 FPS or less. So at the current level of power we have in GPU hardware, I still feel 1440p is the sweet spot. However, that's not to say there aren't reasons to go 4K. The high-end GPUs of today, think Nvidia's GeForce RTX 3080 and above, are quite capable of 4K gaming, and depending on the title, you might be able to run them at high frame rates. If you do have a powerful gaming rig, then grabbing a 4K high refresh monitor could be the way to go. 4K monitors also make the most sense for console gaming on the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, because these systems target 4K outputs, and the PlayStation 5 doesn't even support 1440p. The final reason for going 4K is if you want a lot of flexibility and versatility in your setup. 4K monitors are great for desktop use, productivity apps, and content creation. So if you want to do that alongside gaming, then 4K is the way to go. With the rise of high-performance 4K IPS monitors with wide color gamuts, doing this sort of thing now is better than ever. In today's video, we are purely going to be talking about 4K gaming monitors, which means we are not talking about any 60Hz displays. 120Hz is the minimum. I know some people do still buy cheap 4K 60Hz displays, but I'd recommend that you don't do that for gaming. I also will be mostly talking about products that I've reviewed and tested myself, so I know they are good, rather than guessing or looking at spec sheets. We have full reviews for a lot of the products in this video that are well worth checking out for more in-depth testing and thoughts, but let's get into the recommendations. If you're buying a 4K high refresh gaming monitor right now, by far the best category to invest into is the 27-inch category. 4K monitors around this size deliver the best performance and are the most affordable, making them great buys for a wide variety of use cases. But it's also important to grab something from this current generation of 4K panels, otherwise you will be missing out on key features. One key feature is HDMI 2.1. Only the latest 4K monitors include HDMI 2.1, and honestly, I wouldn't consider buying something that doesn't have it. That's because HDMI 2.1 is required for 4K at refresh rates above 60Hz. So if you have a PC you want to hook up over HDMI, or more crucially, a current gen game console, then HDMI 2.1 is essential. There are lots of older 4K monitors we haven't considered because they fail this basic check. In my opinion, the best 27-inch 4K monitor to buy is actually 28 inches in size, and it's the Gigabyte M28U. The M28U is typically available for $600 to $650 US, making it one of the most affordable 4K 144Hz displays you can buy, and it does support HDMI 2.1. But crucially, it's not some crappy budget 4K monitor with poor performance. The M28U with its Interlux panel is actually one of the best performers in this category that I've seen yet. The M28U has very good response time performance, with an average transition in our testing of 4 milliseconds at 144Hz. It also has very good performance across the refresh range, so for those using adaptive sync variable refresh rates, you don't need to tweak overdrive settings to get the best experience. This IPS monitor delivers speed in the ideal range for the latest generation of IPS panels, so there's no funny business going on here for motion performance, and this is complemented with great backlight strobing that works alongside adaptive sync. This is a better package than you get with some of our previous recommendations at 4K, like the LG 27GN950 and 27GP950. What Gigabyte offers for color quality is also very strong thanks to it being an IPS panel, so viewing angles are excellent and it does pack a wide color gamut, though not as wide as the best monitors of today. Factory calibration is above average, there's a very good sRGB mode for everyday use, and contrast is typical for an IPS panel, no major issues there. To top it all off, Gigabyte include a KVM switch and a height adjustable stand, which are both neat feature additions. While I would recommend the M28U for most people after a 4K gaming monitor of this size, there are some situations where an alternative may be better. One very important thing to point out is the M28U has terrible HDR performance. It's not really an HDR monitor at all. So if you want proper HDR, this is not the monitor for you. Just be aware that getting true HDR will cost you double to triple the MSRP of this monitor. Don't be fooled by fake HDR monitors that add it to the spec sheet without including the required hardware. For those specifically buying a 4K monitor to use with a PlayStation 5, I'd recommend the Asus TUF Gaming VG28 UQL1A instead. The VG28 UQL1A is very similar to the M28U, but isn't quite as good performance-wise and typically costs more, about $800 US, though this is region dependent. However, it has more HDMI 2.1 bandwidth that's better compatible with the PS5, which gives it a leg up. Also, if you really need full DCI P3 coverage for content creation, the M28U doesn't have the best P3 coverage, even though it's a wide gamut monitor. For this use case, you'll be better off with the LG 27GP950, though with an MSRP of $900, it's much more expensive, and for most buyers, it won't be worth the extra cost. There are several other variants that are quite similar to the M28U in that they use the same Innolux 28-inch 4K 144Hz IPS panel that may be worth considering depending on pricing, but for us, the M28U is a safe bet, it's very affordable, and it's our pick in this category. Unfortunately, if you're after a larger 32-inch 4K gaming monitor, you'll just have to accept that these panels are in their infancy, and of those that we've tested so far, performance is a step behind the 27-inch category. 32-inch monitors are also quite a bit more expensive, typically costing at least $200 more than their small equivalent, making this category something to consider only for real high-end buyers. We've tested several options in this category and all have compromised performance in some ways. The best option in my opinion though, and the most versatile choice for a range of use cases, is the MSI Optics MPG321UR-QD. The MSI model's big strength is in color performance. It has a very wide color gamut, covering nearly all of the sRGB, Adobe RGB, and DCI P3 color spaces. This makes it an excellent choice as a dual-use monitor for gaming and content creation. You could flip this display into its built-in Adobe RGB mode for editing images in Photoshop, then play some games at 4K 144Hz when you're done. Or use the decent sRGB mode for watching YouTube content without oversaturation. On top of this, MSI include a KVM switch, full bandwidth HDMI 2.1, semi-HDR functionality, and decent brightness and contrast. Where the MPG321UR-QD stumbles, like a lot of its competitors, is in motion performance. The AU Optronics panel being used here is okay at 144Hz, but on average across the refresh range, it's not that fast, especially compared to 27-inch models. MSI didn't include variable overdrive, which hurts performance and leads to a last-gen IPS experience, although the backlight strobing mode is not too bad. While this is an obvious downside to the display, I'm yet to test an alternative that offers anything meaningfully better. It's also quite expensive, so while I'd say it's the best option, its $1,000 US price tag is not going to be suitable for all buyers, especially with some of the issues mentioned. I'd only buy into this category if you absolutely must have a 32-inch panel and if smaller sizes are a deal breaker. The alternate option to the MPG321UR-QD is Gigabyte's M32U, the larger brother to the M28U. We haven't tested this exact model, but we have tested the Aorus FI32U, which is basically the same monitor, just with a more expensive price tag, features, and design. It's not as expensive as the MSI alternative at just $800 for the M32U, but it also isn't as good and still features several compromises. The M32U, based on our testing of the FI32U, which uses the same panel, it is faster but features high levels of overshoot on average across the refresh range. This is because, like with the MSI model, Gigabyte don't use variable overdrive on these displays, so performance is untamed at lower refresh rates. This leads to the blur trails that you get with the MSI model effectively just being replaced by inverse ghosting trails, even though with better tuning I believe this panel could be faster overall. The M32 also doesn't have anywhere near as wide of a wide color gamut, so it doesn't have enough coverage of Adobe RGB, for example, to be useful. It lacks the versatility of the MSI variant for content creation and productivity work, even though it still looks pretty good in most categories. If you don't care about wide color gamuts, it's still going to be fine and is a more affordable choice, but I'm just not sold on these 32-inch 4K panels yet and feel that another generation of iteration is required. If you're after a normal-sized 4K monitor that can also do full true HDR, well, I hope you are rich because you're going to have to pay thousands of dollars for that privilege. By that I mean, if you are looking at a monitor that claims to support HDR and that monitor costs anything less than $1,500 US, it almost certainly doesn't support true HDR and therefore isn't worth buying at all for HDR gaming or content consumption. Don't get fooled by marketing because most companies are desperate to sell you any old junk and claim it's an HDR monitor, even if it can't actually do HDR at all. There are very few true HDR gaming monitors on the market with a size in the normal range for desktop usage, so in the 32-inch class or lower. Some older displays like the Acer Predator X27 and Asus ROG Swift PG27UQ have actually been discontinued at this point, further reducing the pool to a very small selection of displays. And of those displays, the best one to get is the Asus ROG Swift PG32UQX. When looking for an LCD-based true HDR monitor, what you need to look for is a display with full array local dimming and lots of dimming zones. This allows the panel to provide the contrast required for displaying HDR content as intended. The PG32UQX succeeds in this area by providing an FALD backlight with 1,152 individual zones, the highest currently seen on a monitor-sized gaming LCD, which makes the PG32UQX the best for HDR that you can get. The PG32UQX is a 32-inch 4K 144Hz monitor that uses IPS technology and packs G-Sync Ultimate certification, although it does work with both NVIDIA and AMD GPUs for adaptive sync. While its backlight isn't totally free of blooming, in most HDR content it looks excellent with extremely high brightness capabilities in excess of 1500 nits. Then for contrast, even in the worst cases, the screen is capable of higher than native contrast and deep blacks, which is what HDR is all about. Whether gaming or watching HDR videos, the PG32UQX really pops in its HDR mode, and there are a few other image quality issues to worry about. While HDR is a huge strength of the PG32UQX, and this monitor is basically unrivaled in the current market at its size, it's also a compromised monitor that unfortunately has some fatal flaws outside of HDR performance. One is in the response times. There's no mistaking it, the PG32UQX is slow, with last generation motion performance that can be quite blurry in some situations. Yes, it's nice to get a 144Hz refresh rate, but ideally the panel would be using more modern and faster IPS tech. The lack of competition means there's no faster alternative. As it uses a G-Sync Ultimate module from NVIDIA, there's no HDMI 2.1 support, so the excellent HDR experience is limited to PCs that can output over DisplayPort 1.4 with DSC. This would have been good to use with today's consoles like the PlayStation 5 at above 60Hz, but no HDMI 2.1, which is a killer blow. It's also stupidly expensive with an MSRP of $3,000 US. For the vast majority of buyers, that price tag makes absolutely no sense, especially considering it does have some flaws. So while I am including it here as the best 4K HDR monitor at a normal panel size, it also kind of is the only 4K HDR monitor available at a normal panel size, and it's still somewhat hard to recommend. Hopefully next year we see more mini LED gaming monitors released to compete with this sort of product. If you truly want the best HDR experience on PC and you don't want to pay $3,000 for the PG32UQX, and who could blame you, then by far the best choice is to get a large format 48-inch OLED TV. Yes, this isn't exactly a monitor in terms of size and it won't be suitable for all setups, but the value proposition offered by OLED, as well as its performance in HDR games and content, totally destroys the LCD-based alternatives on the market today. The benefits to OLED are all based around its self-lit pixel technology. As each pixel is individually lit, they can also be fully switched off to display black, leading to extremely deep blacks, detailed shadows, and infinite contrast ratios. This is perfect for HDR as contrast is so important. With an OLED panel, you don't get blooming due to low backlight zone counts, and this looks stunning in practice. Once you've used an OLED, it's hard to go back. The nature of OLEDs is also conducive to extremely fast response times, far faster than any modern LCD. Motion performance at the same refresh rate as an LCD is in the range of 5 times better or more, and this allows for backlight strobing or black frame insertion that smokes what LCDs can do in terms of clarity. Today's 48-inch OLEDs can reach 120Hz refresh rates, which isn't the fastest going around, but it is sufficient for a smooth, high refresh experience at 4K. At this stage, I've tested two 48-inch OLEDs for gaming and PC use, and my recommendation is to get the LG C1 OLED or its very similar brother, the LG CX OLED, depending on pricing and availability in your region. The C1 is a feature-rich TV with outstanding image quality, motion clarity, and HDR performance, which is worth its asking price, provided you have enough space for the large panel. The C1 has a typical MSRP of $1,500 US, so it's not cheap, but it's also half the price of the ludicrous PG32UQX and is better in almost every way, so I guess it's also kind of good value for gaming. Just make sure you have an HDMI 2.1 capable GPU from the latest NVIDIA or AMD GPU series, as there's no DisplayPort on this TV. Although the HDMI 2.1 ports are full bandwidth and support Dolby Vision, so the C1 is compatible with lots of other devices including media players and game consoles. While I'd have no trouble recommending the C1 to someone using it for content consumption or gaming, there are some drawbacks that are important to mention. The first is the risk of burn-in, which is not that relevant for viewing mixed content, but is likely to happen if you are using the C1 as a desktop monitor. Static content like web browsers and other desktop apps are not ideal for OLED panels, and some of the panel protection features are ineffective or annoying for desktop use, like the automatic brightness limiter and pixel shifter. These OLED panels also just haven't been designed for desktop use. Their RGBW subpixel layout is not great for text clarity, the massive size is inconvenient for a lot of setups, and brightness is very low compared to today's LCDs, though it's acceptable-ish for HDR content in the HDR mode. Again, great for use solely as a content consumption display, not great for desktop users. Hopefully in the future some of these issues are resolved through smaller panel sizes, higher refresh rates, and newer OLED tech that's less prone to burn-in, but right now if you want the best HDR experience, then a TV such as the LG C1 is definitely the way to go. At the end of the day, now is a great time to buy a 27-inch 4K monitor for gaming. We're finally seeing some really compelling products hit the market that aren't full of compromises in that category specifically. Unfortunately, most other categories I'm not that optimistic about right now, especially if you want 4K HDR, as the HDR ecosystem remains pretty woeful on PC and desperately needs more options. By the looks of panel roadmaps for the major LCD manufacturers, 2022 is set to be a better year for 4K monitors with more options, newer panels, and more HDR configurations. We might also see smaller OLED displays hit the market to shake up PC HDR further. So next time I produce one of these videos, hopefully there are more good monitors to talk about, but also some of the options we're talking about today may suit your needs in the meantime. Anyway, that's it for today's monitor recommendation video. This is the culmination of lots of testing that we do throughout the year on various different monitors, so please check out the full reviews of some of the products that we've talked about today if you want further information. Also, please consider supporting our channel and independent monitor testing. If you're interested, we have links to our Floatplane and Patreon pages down below. If you sign up to Floatplane, you'll get early access to some of our videos, and also things like our Discord community, monthly live streams, and behind the scenes videos. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.